From the Oklahoman Podcast Studio, this is the Press Row Podcast. I'm Jenni Carlson here with Barry Tramel on a rainy Monday morning, Barry, after a really nice weekend. So I guess we got a little reprieve, right?
Yeah, sort of fun.
We had snow on Wednesday,
I'm not
Thursday.
sure we've been downtown on a rainy day.
Yeah.
Snowy, yes. Nice, yes. Rainy, no.
All right, so we're going to have to use the tunnels and
I like it.
dodge the rain. It'll be
good. I
good.
like warm rain.
Yeah.
I don't mind walking in the warm rain. I know it'd mess up your hair, but I like walking
it
in
might
the warm rain.
mess up your hair. Let's be honest here.
You're right. I misspoke. You wouldn't like it if it messed up your hair.
All right. Enough funning around. Let's get to real business and serious business. We're going to start today the big lead with an unfortunate story, Barry, and that is the situation involving the SAE fraternity at OU. A leaked video comes out over the weekend of members of the SAE fraternity chanting racist, well, not even a chant, it's a song. It's a sing-songy song. I don't know what other word to use involving very racist verbiage, and SAE House has been told that they're being shuttered. Members have to move out. David Bourne very upset about the situation. Barry, obviously this is a sports podcast, but when we're talking about issues of race on college campuses, and obviously a campus like OU where sports is a big deal, a large minority population involved in those sports. This is a big deal. Lots of current and former OU athletes speaking out on social media. There was a prayer circle this morning of OU athletes on campus. They're obviously extremely impacted by this, Barry, and clearly an unfortunate situation that this is happening. But it strikes me that the fact that this was not a chant, it was a song. This is something that's been taught. This is something that it's seeped into this house, and it's part of this fraternity, and that makes it even more disturbing to me, Barry.
Well, disturbing, yes.
Surprising?
Outraging.
No.
Right, exactly. Surprising, no. Now, I am not the world's foremost expert on fraternities. In fact, I've had extensive dealings with fraternities. I told you earlier, I have delivered probably 3,000 pizzas to the fraternities at OU when I was a kid. When I was 17, I worked at Orange Fine Pizza, and he specialized in delivering to the students.
But you have no idea which one was which.
I don't know the names. I learned them by address. If you want to know addresses, I can talk addresses all day long. And I can tell you that the heaviest pizza eaters back in the day were 737 ASP. So whoever that is, I don't know. I actually learned one of the sororities, Delta Delta Delta, which was sort of easy to remember the name. So that's the only one I know. But here's the stereotype of fraternities: bunch of guys that get together and drink and participate in some probably scurrilous activity with girls, and are fairly boneheaded in their progressive thinking, including racism. Mm-hmm. That's the stereotype. I'm sure every fraternity in the world will tell you those are long gone characteristics. And then things like this happen, and you see, you know what, they're not that gone, and they're not that long. So it's very unfortunate. I found it interesting. David Bourne's response was quick and lethal.
Yeah.
Shutting you down, and not only are we shutting you down, you got until Tuesday night to get out.
Right.
You got literally 48 hours to find a place to stay. But outside of that, I don't care what happens, but you're gone.
Yeah.
So I found that interesting. And the reason, when you hear about this and you work in sports, you think, well, if you're a fan, I'm sure I'm going to get emails today from OU fans that say, hey, does this affect recruiting? And the answer is, heck yeah, it affects recruiting in all sports, but forget athletics.
Yeah.
David Bourne, I think, is outraged on a personal level, but I think he's also outraged on a business level.
Yeah. How are you going to sell kids on your university when this is apparently going on?
He goes all over the country, particularly in Oklahoma and Texas, and tells people what a great place he's got. And then he's got to deal with this, which is contrary to his message. Mm-hmm. So this hurts the business brand of the University of Oklahoma. So it's a bad thing. Some good can come out of it if it brings, some dialogue and some enlightenment and and maybe some sobering up to some people, but just a very bad thing. It's going to be a negative. It's going to be a serious negative on OU's story.
We were talking before we started the podcast today with Paige Dillard, who oversees our video and audio production here at the Oklahoman, and she brought up the fact that there have been other incidents at other schools, including OSU. There was a Halloween party involving some racist costumes, if you will. Now, it didn't appear to be as inherent to the fraternity. It was a limited number of members who did that, and that's probably been within the last decade or so. So it was different in that it wasn't everybody at the Halloween party dressed up a certain way, or everybody on the bus like we see on that video sing-songing the same thing. So it's not to say that this hasn't happened other places, but that doesn't change the fact that you've got something pretty sinister going on here at an institution on campus. And I think a lot of athletes have expressed outrage, and rightfully so. I mean, I think that if you're an athlete at OU, I assume that you're thinking these are some of the same people that are coming and cheering us as a team on a Saturday afternoon, but on Saturday night they would say, we don't want any part of you in our membership. We don't want any part of you in our leadership. We don't want anything to do with you. So, I mean, I think that that's a really, and I don't blame them for feeling that way, because I would think if you're seeing it out of one fraternity, why wouldn't you assume it's happening other places? And like you say, those long-held stereotypes, people will say, oh no, it's not like that. But then stuff like this happens, and how do you think otherwise?
Well, you used the proper word, and I actually was trying to think of a good word. The word I had was evil, which is a little bit not the best word. The best word is the one you used, sinister. Mm. And here's what I find interesting about this. We all know people who are stuck in the past.
Sure.
We all know people who are racist, and frankly, they learned it at the age of 2 and 3, and
they still whisper words that they know aren't right, but they say them anyway.
Most of those people are the older generation. Yeah. Certainly, you're quickly catching up to my generation. We're going to be in the same generation pretty soon.
It doesn't work that way, Barry.
I believe that it does. I believe that it does.
I get to stay in my generation.
No, I believe that it does.
I just get older. We all get older.
But certainly above my generation, I have uncles and, people I've known all my life that,
sure,
don't really talk the way I wish they would. But most of that is sort of, it's not inherent, but it's just something that's been such a part of them. In a lot of ways, they really don't know any better.
Yeah.
College kids can't make that claim. They didn't grow up that way.
No.
If they were taught that way, it was not sort of by osmosis. It was by, I'm not scientific, but whatever the opposite of osmosis. I mean, it was a direct, clear plan.
Right.
And they've had access to all kinds of enlightenment just by their very appearance and enrollment at the University of Oklahoma.
Right.
They're open to that enlightenment. And this is not something, I've got, when I talked about that older generation, they are held accountable for their action, but some of what they say and do, you really can't hold them responsible for. Mm-hmm. Or you can understand it. Maybe that's a better way to say it. You can sort of understand it. This is indefensible.
Yeah.
This is not defensible. This is, I know better, but I don't care. Mm-hmm. This is, I know what everybody says, but I am going to revolt against decency.
Yeah.
That's what this is. And that's why, I think most people would side with David Boren and say, you know what, the clear, decisive action is the proper move.
Yeah, and you know what, you mentioned earlier the recruiting aspect, and like you say, it's recruiting everything. It's not just recruiting athletes; it's recruiting scholars and national merit finalists, and kids from, Poto and kids from Boise City, and I mean, it's recruiting everywhere that is going to be affected by this. But I have to think every coach that wears the OU colors out on the recruiting trail has got to be over the moon thankful that David Boren did what he did. It's not going to be easy to go into a lot of homes and try to recruit kids for the next couple weeks and months. There's going to be a lot of hard questions, but at least that those coaches can say, hey, our university stepped up and didn't say we're going to wait for an investigation, didn't say we're going to wait to see who the offending parties are. They said, this is unacceptable. They're gone. That's got to at least be a small bright spot.
Yeah, you're right.
Moving ahead.
That does help. But you know how it works in recruiting. When people tell you about other places, they only tell you part of the story.
Sure. So
if you're Lon Kruger, if you're Bob Stoops, if you're Sherry Cole, if you're anybody that deals with a bunch of minority athletes when you recruit, then this has got them. They've just made your job harder.
Yeah,
they've made your job much harder. And I think it's a situation where when you talk about, most people are enlightened enough to know. I mean, if you go recruit a safety out of Dallas or a power forward out of Houston, I mean, you can make them understand. On the other hand, they haven't seen anything like this out of maybe another school.
Yeah.
And
University of Texas, University of Mississippi.
It's a difficult.
Go down the list.
It's a difficult, and maybe they have. I mean, every school, as you said, has its problem areas, but these are difficult decisions for most athletes where to go to school, because they're not making choices. They're not picking off a bad list. Most of them are all positive. They really can't go wrong.
Yeah.
If you make a decision to make it a good one, and you sort of look for ways to cross somebody off a list. And this is sort of an easy way to cross somebody off a list.
Right.
So that's the fear if you're Bob Stoops, if you're Lon Kruger, if you're Sherry Cole.
Yeah, because I guess you don't even know, Barry, that the thing is you don't even know what kid may cross you off before you even get a chance to get in there and say, hey, listen, this was handled quickly. This is not the way the university is as a whole. This is not the way it is around my team. Come to campus, see for yourself. I mean, you may have athletes that might have come to Oklahoma before, and now there's that first glance, no, I'm not even going to look at them, because why would I go to a place like that has stuff like that going on? And Barry, I can't blame him. I can't blame him for crossing OU off the list like that. I mean, if you're a top level athlete, which if you're talking about football, men's basketball, women's basketball, some of these other sports, they're choosing from the best of the best. So if your list includes, University of Texas, Ohio State, I don't know, where USC, whatever great football programs you want to throw out there, or, good basketball programs. If you've got a bunch of other choices, just don't even don't even say OU's a consideration. I mean, you've got to have some kids right now who are freshman, sophomore, maybe getting into that junior level, who are just saying, okay, no, that's off the list. So, I think you've got some kids that you might have got a foot in the door, and then who knows, now you may not even get a foot in the door.
Yeah, it could be. And full disclosure, were you in a sorority at KU?
I was not.
I assume you had the opportunity to be. Why did you make that decision?
Well, I guess everybody has the opportunity to be in a fraternity or sorority.
Well, you got the opportunity to rush, and I assume they would accept you.
Well, I don't know. I guess. I don't know. I never even thought about it. So,
well, you're a fine, upstanding human being. Somebody would have taken you on.
Well,
you could walk around hat in hand to all the houses saying, please, let me live here.
No, I was actually, I went to University of Kansas, which is known. It's out there. And I went there at least in part because I got accepted to something they call scholarship halls, which is based on academics and high school and just all that sort of stuff. You have to keep your grades at a certain level to stay, but I wanted that environment, academic environment. So
sounds similar to like OU's honors college.
I don't know specifics, but yes, I would say that's probably right. Maybe the difference, I don't know. because I know they have some honors floors in the dorms for some of the honors college students at OU, but with the scholarship halls at Kansas, they were separate buildings, and they were, to be honest, they were actually sort of surrounded by a good chunk of the fraternities and sororities on campus at Kansas, just the way that they ended up sort of being placed on campus. So they're separate buildings. They're not within the dorms. They're not a floor. They're their own building. And then all of the residents, it's cooperative living. So like you lived there, it was a little bit cheaper, and part of the reason why was because you helped with the cleaning, you helped with the cooking, different duties around the house itself you were involved with. So somewhat similar, but different from other living arrangements, I guess. It would be the way I would describe it. So there you have it. But we were surrounded by fraternities and sororities. I knew a lot of people who were in fraternities and sororities. Was never really I didn't really ever go to any events at their houses. I visited several occasions and studied and did some different things, but I can't ever remember a specific function I went to. But my suspicion is what you said earlier is right. Some of those long-held stereotypes are probably, unfortunately, still very true, even though, there are good people in every institution, people that you would like, people that I would like, people that you would like, people anybody would like. But there's still things that are inherent to those institutions and long held. And I keep going back to that, Barry. The thing that to me is most disturbing about this is that racist chant was not a chant like you could pick up in 12 seconds.
Somebody didn't do it just off the top of their head.
They were taught.
It was orchestrated.
It was taught. It was orchestrated. And to me, that takes it to a different level in my mind.
Well, like I said, what I said about frats and the pizza, that's absolutely true. That's the full extent of my knowledge of fraternities. But I can remember, some frats were like Animal House.
Mm-hmm.
They just obviously just a bunch of crazy kids
Sure.
having wild life and acting not evil but goofy.
Mm-hmm.
You walked into some that gave you the willies.
Mm.
I mean, I've been in at least one at OU where the Confederate flag was hung on the wall, not in a room like in the lobby or where the living quarter. I don't know what you call it, but in like the parlor,
Yeah.
I would call it.
Common
yeah,
space that
right.
anybody could see
Exactly.
if they walked in.
And I thought, this is a long time ago, but still, it wasn't that long ago.
Wasn't 1952.
Yeah, right.
92 or something like that.
I thought, what's going on here? That's not really, it's not kosher. And so I think there are students in fraternities that really don't understand maybe some of the things they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully this SAE stuff, maybe some guys got caught up in it that didn't really understand, but like I said, I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, in this day and age. So it's a bad day for Oklahoma, but it's, the response is good. If you have a swift response, that counters some of the negative things. And David Boren, he may have many faults, but his leadership is exemplary in a lot of ways, and one way is decisive action on things that are right and wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've seen here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I go back to I think back to days of, well, probably not that long ago, but situations that were untoward involving athletics. And I mean, this is probably holds for non-athletic situations too, but on a lot of campuses where you would hear, we're going to handle that internally. We're going to let the legal system run its course before we decide, anymore. That I think the idea that, and I know this is straying into athletic talk when we're really talking about university-wide, but I think a lot of that has to do with leadership from the top. If you know that your leadership at the top is not going to have any, there's no wiggle room for, allowing somebody who might be in the middle of something that could be decided, and suddenly you've got a felon playing on your team. I mean, you know that that's not allowed. You're gonna take swift action. I think the idea that sports is not a right, sports is a privilege, and wearing Oklahoma State, Tulsa, Putnam City, Classen, whatever school we're talking about, that's a privilege, not a right. And if you do something, even if the courts haven't said you're guilty, the person that's given you that privilege can still say, I'm sorry, you lost that privilege until we get this figured out. And OU's taken that stance. We've seen that in recent years. And so to me, it's not surprising that David Bourne was so fast in his action. But I think there was probably a time that maybe that wasn't necessarily the case at OU, at OSU, or wherever we're talking about.
Well, it's a I was not alive when OU was integrated, but my father was a student at OU when OU was integrated, 1952 or 3. I forget the year. I should know the year, but I can't remember. Maybe it's the 52-53 school year. But anyway, he was a senior that year. So when we talk about how long ago this was when things were radically different, while the number sort of sobers us up, it really wasn't that long ago when you talk about, the people that that were involved. So,
well, I mean, we're talking about coming off the weekend anniversary of 50 years of Bloody Sunday at the bridge in Selma, on the March to Selma. I mean, there's a sitting U.S. congressman who was beaten that day. So, I mean, to think that we're that far removed from those days, I mean, we're not. Have we come a long way? I mean, John Lewis, that sitting U.S. congressman who was beat that day, is introducing the first black U.S. president 50 years from that day. So we've clearly come a ways, but, there's still, we're in the, I saw somebody on social media mention this, we're sort of in the post-racial, I'm sure I'm going to mess this up, post-segregation days, obviously, but post, racism days, we're not there yet. We're not to post-racism. We're post-segregation, but there's still racism out there in the world.
Yeah, it's the good news is, in my opinion, which I think my opinion is valid, we have come a long way because, I can give you 100 instances of how American society has changed in terms of racism just in my lifetime, which is, I'm 54. When did I start paying attention? I think I started paying attention at a pretty good age. I was probably 10.
Yeah.
So I've been paying attention for 44 years to what's going on in the world. And there's a radical difference in terms of, how people are accepted, where people live, what people do, how people respond to racism. We really don't allow it in polite society anymore.
Yeah.
It's really just it's really been pushed to the fringes. It really has, and it still bubbles up. I'm not saying it doesn't bubble up in certain ways that need to be eradicated, but we have come a long way, and in some ways, an incident like this shows you that we have come a long way.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, ever how many years you want to go back, 30, forever, I don't know how long you want to go back, but there was a time when this would not have raised an eyebrow. Right. This would not have been a big deal. It wouldn't have been recorded on a cell phone video, but it might have been, a story might have, a story might have made the student paper. The frat house sang this song on the way to some party. And it would not have made big waves.
Right.
They might have got an admonition from the president's office or something saying, "Hey guys, cut that out."
Right.
So we really don't go for it anymore. We've cast it to the fringes, and perhaps from the fringes, perhaps from the edge, it can just fall off the cliff. That's what the idea that we're post-segregation, not post-racism. And, for all I know, we'll never get rid of it. It's possible that it's impossible to get rid of totally.
Entirely, yeah.
Same with sexism, but it is possible to chase it into the corners where it's afraid to show its head.
Yeah. Well, I think this incident will make a lot of people think about, what they might or might not be doing. It's definitely, as you say, not a fun day. Definitely a gray day, a dark day for OU. So we'll be following this. I know a lot of, as we said earlier, a lot of feedback from athletes and coaches, and I'm sure we'll continue to hear more as the story progresses. Thanks for joining us for this Press Row podcast, and be sure to stay with the best coverage team every day in the Oklahoman and on News OK.